So the central bank has decided to wrap up the year with one last rate cut. Let's discuss in detail with Professor Yang Hee-dong this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, good morning.
So I feel like the rate cut came as more of a surprise. Why do you think made them cut the rate for the second time?
Well, it's quite interesting to know that for the past 16 years, the BOK never lowered the base interest twice in a row. The last time that they went down the interest rate twice in a row was year 2008 when we had the very national emergencies due to a financial crisis. So why, BOK has lowered the interest rate twice in a row, for the first time in the past 16 years. The first one is our economic condition is so worrisome. In the second quarter of this year, our economic growth, turned to negative, minus 0.2. In the third quarter, our growth rate stayed at 0.1. And for the next year, lots of economic research centers turned very pessimistic. For example, BOK announced that they lowered their next year's economic growth from 2.1 to 1.9. IMF in this month, November, lowered from 2.2 to 2.0. KDI from 2.1 to 2.0. Goldman Sachs from the 2.0 to 1.8.
Right.
And Morgan Stanley, Nomura Securities, JP Morgan, all those institutions still staying with 1.7. So that is the major drivers why the BOK lowered the base interest rate.
Professor Yang, then I have to ask you, how necessary was the rate cut in terms of stability in the long term?
Well, we should think about the impacts of the growth of export. Well, the export is not necessarily related to the interest rate, but we have very worrisome forecast for the next year due to very uncertainty of American government's economic policies. Donald Trump declared that he wants to increase the tariff up to 60% for Chinese import and 1 over 20% for the general tariff, even 25% for the imports from Mexico and Canada. Lots of American companies have invested a lot of money to Mexico, right, to benefit from the new government policy that tried to replace NAFTA in the regime of Donald Trump. But every policies, every economic regulation have turned so uncertain. So, our economy depends about more than 30% for the export, for the sake of our GDP. Unless we, improve our economic conditions with this kind of very different approaches like interest rate, we cannot make up for the expected, the very pessimistic impacts from this uncertain, the American trade policies. For the sake of our GDP and also export growth. That is the major, the big issue.
Right. And what was also announced earlier this morning is that the central bank lowering the growth rate to 2.2% for next year, 2025. Now, should we be relieved that it's still above the 2% range?
Well, I hope so, but many people estimate that they still estimate that the Federal Reserve Bank will lower their base rates by 25 bps again in December. So I think BOK has a very solid confidence that they can keep the very stable margin between the base interests between the BOK and FRB. That could be another reason why BOK decided to lower their base interest rates. And besides, if we are surrounded by all this pessimistic forecast for the next year's economic growth, and what else can you do? You have to do something to, stimulate the economic expectation for the next year by lowering interest rates. So we need some stimulus. We need some stimulus from the BOK, so that we should be we really confirm that every major authorities in Korea, like BOK and Korean government, has great concern for the economic growth for the next year. So I think it is a very timely decision from BOK.
Well, then, the BOK decided to wrap up the year with one last rate cut. Now, is it safe to say there'll be more rate cuts in the coming months, in the first half of 2025?
I think so. Because, as I already said, the Federal Reserve Bank in the United States, is very much highly expected to lower their BPs by 25 BPs in December. And the next meeting of BOK for financial market control will be held in January next year. So they will keep on monitoring what's going on in the FRB. And if FRB lower their base interest as the market, expects, absolutely be okay. We'll go ahead to lower the base interest rates by 25% more. Still, we may keep the same levels, same gaps between BOK and FRB. So we still have some slacks to lower the base interest rates, and it really, really makes sense to promote our economic activities.
Right, which makes today's rate cut more timely than ever. Now, with the economy outlook looking, increasingly rather bleak, calls to be prepared to cope with worst-case situations are also growing. The question is, what measures should there be to boost economic vitality at this point?
Well, if you get focused on the very gloomy perspective for next year, we should be concerned about three major forces for this uncertainty. The first one comes from Donald Trump. Donald Trump has declared that he wants to charge very high tariffs over all the imports from all over the world, up to 6% from China. Directly and indirectly, many experts estimate that our GDP will be lowered, will be affected by negatively from this policy, up to even 1.1 percentage point in terms of economic growth, which is a very, very, big concern. As I already said, Donald Trump even, wants to turn over his predetermined the trade policies, USMCA, replacing NAFTA in the second regime of his tenure. So he's so out of control. He is so unexpected. And second uncertainty factor is decrease in the semiconductors and the automobiles. These are two major items pushing our export. But next year, our semiconductor growth will be stay about 2.2, even though its growth rate is about over 40% this year. Automobiles will be decreased by almost 2%. So these are a major concern. The third reason is our domestic consumption will decrease about 2% next year. So all the three factors, ask all of us, BOK and Korean government to do something. If we lose this time, the policy, we never know what happened in the next year.
Right. Alrighty, Professor Yang, thanks so much for connecting with us this morning. We appreciate it as always.
Thank you. Have a good day.